Welcome to today's edition of Fight News Now. I'm John Pollock. Coming up over the next hour, we will discuss all the latest news in mixed martial arts as Tony Ferguson is out of his fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov. We're also going to take a look at this Sunday's headliner involving Ben Rothwell and Junior Dos Santos as the UFC goes into Croatia, and you will hear an exclusive interview with Rothwell discussing that fight, plus a look at the Glory 29 card and lots more coming your way on Fight News Now. We are joined by John Ramdeen and Robin Black to go over all of the news happening today in mixed martial arts. We start off in the lightweight division of the UFC as Tony Ferguson is out of his fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov. That was set for the UFC on Fox card April the 16th in Tampa. Now, there are reports out there that they are looking for an opponent. Ariel Helwani even going so far as to say Donald Cerrone being the front runner for that spot. But let's start off with Tony Ferguson. We don't know specifically what the issue is, but he noted that he was discovered to have fluid and blood in his lungs. So something obviously very concerning and eliminating him from this fight, which many people were looking forward to, John.
Yeah, I mean, right now, when you look at the 155-pound picture, it is some of the most talented fighters in all of mixed martial arts. So you know somebody that gets to the top of the mountain really deserved to get their crack at the championship. We know that Conor McGregor was supposed to be facing RDA, but right now, when you look at the top 10 into the top 15 and even into the top 20 of the lightweight division, not just in the UFC, but overall, in the grand scheme of things, it has looked better now than it ever has in mixed martial arts. There's a lot of worthy challengers, and I wouldn't be surprised if they found somebody for the Eagle quickly.
Yeah, when you hear that Tony had that fluid and blood in his lungs, we haven't heard the causation yet, but often overtraining can cause a number of reactions and syndromes that'll include that. And you'll think about it, oh, well, all he's doing is overtraining. Overtraining is a scary thing when you push your body past what it's willing to accept. Sometimes your nervous system will respond poorly. Sometimes your digestive system, that doesn't look good when that happens. Sometimes it'll be psychological, like depression or stress. Sometimes it'll be endocrine system based. And sometimes it's things like this. Overtraining is a very, very dangerous thing. And it's usually done because the fighter's just driving. You have this belief that more is better, striving is better. That's not always the case. That's not guaranteed that's the case in this, but it's a pretty good guess.
I would imagine that it also comes down to your opponent, too. We see Daniel Cormier being forced to pull out of his fight. Rafael dos Anjos having to pull out of his fight with Conor McGregor because they understood, I think, the opponent that was standing in front of her, maybe the most difficult opponent of their careers, so they push a little harder than they would in the past. And maybe this is the case with Tony Ferguson because we all believe that Khabib is one of the most talented fighters at 155 pounds, despite the fact that he hasn't been in there in a while.
Well, that's just it. I mean, this will be, whenever he is fighting, whether it's in a few weeks or whether it's postponed, this guy's not fought since April of 2014, and that was a win over the current light champion in Rafael dos Anjos, who has since thrown out the option of facing Nurmagomedov in a rematch at UFC 200. So in a weird way, if that were to play itself out, this could be very beneficial to Nurmagomedov, who would leapfrog a Tony Ferguson and go right to the title fight. Is that something you can see as a possibility?
I can see it because all you need is a storyline, and right now Nurmagomedov has that storyline. He has a victory over the current champion, so you could see how the UFC can say, okay, all we need to do is put some awesome promos together and we'll be able to tell that story and people will tune in. But right now, the lightweight division is so deep, it doesn't, in my opinion, I don't think it matters. I think there's so many options right now for the lightweight champion.
Yeah, there's talk going around in different ways of like Nate Diaz going, that belt is a fantasy. Conor McGregor saying I'd way rather fight Nate Diaz than fight for my belt. It's defend his belt. There's something that has been talked about for a long time. It's like, yes, titles are important. Titles have always been important in any sport, but matchups themselves are what captures people's imaginations. And this might be a little telling, but whether it is RDA or Cowboy Cerrone, really give it some thought. Which fight would you rather see? Yes, Khabib already beat RDA. RDA is the title. Or do you want to see that guy with the cowboy hat who comes out gunning and will take any fight? Which fight would you actually rather see?
We also now have a new main event for that card in Tampa, and that will be the previously announced light heavyweight bout between Rashad Evans and Glover Teixeira, which now becomes a 5-round main event, which is very funny because when they first implemented the 5-round main events, it was always stated that in the event of an injury, we'll just have the co-feature moved up and we're not going to change things around. But here they are just over 2 weeks, or just under 2 weeks away from this card. And these guys go from preparing for 3 rounds to all of a sudden this is a 5-round fight, which drastically changes the complexion of a fight.
I'll tell you, we've been in the room with lots of UFC fighters, and they hate the 5-round main event thing. It's just a more difficult thing. You're almost fighting 2 fights instead of what kind of. If you look back in history, the whole purpose was it didn't matter what the rounds were. It's the combat you were going to see over the allotted 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 25 minutes. And I think why put more stress on these fighters? Why get them more, like whether it's 15 minutes, there's been plenty of times where you see fighters after 15 minutes exhausted. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to have Rashad and Teixeira fight 25 minutes because I don't think people are really anticipating that. They just want to see a great light heavyweight fight, 2 guys that are going to be fresh in the first round and the 15th minute. I don't know if they're going to be that way, taking this fight on short notice for 25 minutes.
Well, if it comes up and if it is run past you, it's not always, but I'm fighting Ramdeen and I'm in the best shape of my life and I'm not sure if he is, I'll push for that 25 minutes. But in general, think about it. Somebody, you're going to work for 15 minutes or 15 hours or 15 days, whatever. And now it's suddenly become 25 hours or 25 days, same paycheck. Hey, wait a second. Hey, that's a lot more work.
That's going to be one of the biggest issues, I think, in this fight, the fact that it's such short notice and for whatever reason, this one is.
And they're not spring chickens.
No, and I think I'm with you. I think that you've put in all this work in your camp preparing for 15 minutes. Is this such a necessity that we have to increase this and drastically change it? Another item for us, Miesha Tate has now signed a new deal replacing her older one, probably a much more lucrative one now that she is the women's bantamweight champion, and certainly now everyone awaits when her next fight will be. Of course, everyone wants to be on this 200 card. Not every champion is going to get to fight there, and Miesha Tate, she could be on the sidelines until the fall. Again, it all goes back to Ronda Rousey's schedule and what they want to do.
Yeah, Miesha Tate's smart. You and I had a chance to talk to her. She seems very, very analytical, and I think one of the reasons why is because she's been in this game for a long time, surrounds herself with good people, and she understands. I mean, a lot of people did not give her a chance in that fight with Holly Holm. She has to look at her career and how to make the most money of her career, and that is by taking the biggest fights humanly possible. And I think if we're all objective about things and we look at it, the biggest fight for Miesha Tate is a fight with Ronda Rousey. And I think she just has to wait to see what's going on with Ronda Rousey. She's not afraid to fight anybody. It doesn't matter who's in her division, but she wants to make the most money, and we all know that's the biggest payday is the fight with Ronda.
Absolutely. The biggest possible payday in the world was running that highlight reel of that pretty lady kicking that famous lady in the head over and over again and seeing that fight again. Absolutely the biggest fight that could have been made. And it is very rare. I'll tell you, the UFC, Joe Silva, Dana White, none of these people really think that far ahead because after, this many years, they know they can't plan what fight is what fight. But Miesha Tate is a stellar fighter. She has star power in her own right. She's incredibly beautiful. You cheer for her. But Miesha Tate against Holly Holm in that rematch is nowhere near the money as Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey in that rematch. But you got to figure a close second is Miesha Tate versus Ronda Rousey because Ronda's still such a big star. People are very curious across the world what she's up to.
One final topic. The UFC has announced their latest idea for the Ultimate Fighter is going to be a flyweight tournament, and the winner of the season is going to get a championship fight on the finale card in December. So they are going to be taking someone outside of the UFC who will get a flyweight title fight against either Demetrius Johnson or Henry Cejudo. Are we just reaching at this point?
Hey, I will tell you right now, there is a top Canadian prospect from Quebec that has a fight at the end of April. The goal is win that fight, go to the tryouts, get yourself onto the Ultimate Fighter because, he's
the tryouts are before the end of April.
Right, so that's the thing. It's true. He's going to get that victory, go to the tryouts. The idea is to get onto the show, win the show, and make a name for yourself.
And you're cool with this winner that's going to bypass everybody in the UFC flyweight division?
Not necessarily, but again, we have to wait to see because there's been times where there's so much talent out there that we just don't know it. We believed when we watched The Ultimate Fighter, when Carlos Esparza won the show, it's like, okay, these are the best fighters out there.
Very different.
Sure, very different, but
you were able to pick from the creme de la creme of 115 pounds. It was a new
betting
division.
right here, it is not a bunch of new people. It's 8 of the top UFC flyweights. I'll bet you anything that's the
They're
game.
holding tryouts, though.
Yeah, well, okay, 4 of the top UFC flyweights and 4 other ones. I mean, listen, realistically, it would be hard-pressed to see any flyweight in the world at any level beat Demetrius Johnson if he's on his game, if he's fit, if he's healthy, if he's got it all together, because nobody is unbeatable if enough variables change. So Henry Cejudo among them, and he's a brilliant fighter. To really see a top performing at his best Demetrius lose to any of these top guys, unthinkable or very hard to think of. Anybody outside of the UFC, that is crazy, but maybe it's a talking point. Sometimes you get everybody excited. We get people on Twitter and Reddit and wherever freaking out because that's part of the game of any kind of promotion in the world today. And then you come back and go, oh, actually, they'll be fighting so-and-so for it. You know, that's part of the game.
Well, that's what they're clearly trying to do with The Ultimate Fighter. Keep everything talking. All right, well, we're going to be doing a lot of talking on Thursday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time as we get set for the UFC's debut in Croatia, headlined by Ben Rothwell and Junior Dos Santos. Tune in Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern, here on Fight Network.